Here are 9 best AI tools to build advanced automations and agents. I will walk you through each one of them, share real-life examples. We'll discuss the company behind each software, the pros and cons, so that you can make an informed decision. And also, I will suggest you the best ones based on my experience if you are a business, individual, or an agency looking to sell these solutions. I want you to first understand this thing. You can literally build almost anything with any of these tools. So the tool does not matter. Unfortunately, we have the thing called analysis paralysis, where you spend too much time figuring out the tool to use and not actually completing the thing. That's why I am doing this video. Let's go backwards. First, difference between automations and agents. Automations are usually running on the background, and agents require some sort of an input. Usually, obviously, agents can also run on the background, but this is how I explain it to my customers, and this is how I understand it in the simplified way. Why tool matter? Because the company behind the tool matter. So let's say first we need to understand, depending who you are, you might think about choosing the right tool differently. If you are a business, you and implementing AI automations on agents inside your company, you need to make sure that this tool will be relevant in a few years. Plus, there will be a lot of demand from the developers that you can actually hire and make modifications. If you are an individual doing something for yourself to help you be more productive, I would say the tool does not matter, and you can literally explore each one of these tools just to improve yourself, to learn something new. If you are an agency, this is very important because of the two things. First, if you're trying to sell it, people need to understand how to navigate inside the tools if you are providing it as a one-time build. Plus, you can offer lower prices if the solution that you're building it on more advanced with more functions, so that you do not need to connect external apps and overcomplicate your work. Support, obviously, very matter, as well as the community. So usually, bigger the company, more support they will have, more money they will invest in the guys like me to sponsor the content. By the way, none of these tools sponsored this video, so this is unbiased. This is biased opinion, but this is not a sponsored one. So more money, usually the money has, more they spend on the marketing, buying guys like me exploring different options to build with this tool, so you have more tutorials on the topic. On the community side, again, so more people using it, they need more help, they go into the Discord or into the forums sharing them ideas. Okay, now let's talk about the actual AI agents overview, so that you can then understand how each tool comes in handy with each one of these aspects of building an advanced agent. We have inputs and outputs. Inputs are either manual or automated, like triggers, aka automations. This is what I mentioned here, right? So on the automations, you usually have the triggers that go automatically. I am generalizing it to make it easier for you to understand. I hope you get the idea. So this is like an example. We have either a trigger that is triggered by a certain action on the back end, or it's triggered by a schedule, as you can see here. Then we do certain action, and then there is an end of the flow. This is how automations usually look like, or we're just passing something through the webhook to the automation sequence and then process the data afterwards. If we are talking about manual triggers, there are text and voice. For example, text could be the text or the text with files. These are what we call usually, again, internal agents for a company, or if you're individual for yourself, that looks like either a chat interface or a form. For example, this is the form. You input some information here, you choose some options, you click execute, and then you have your execution. The chat interface is literally the same way as the ChatGPT with the tools running on the backend. So it's more like a chat without and actually choosing the predefined options like here. We can also have a voice inputs if you're building a voice AI agents, either attached to the phone number, or maybe if you are or someone sends a voice message with an instruction, we can prompt AI to analyze the message and do something on the backend with all of the tools. When it comes to the output, we have the backend and we have the visual output. So the backend, again, more for the automations. When something is triggered, for example, email is received, we are sending the response. The human attention is not needed, so the flow goes through different tools and sequences and then execute the final point. The visual outputs are a bit different because you are an AI tool outputting something with either text, files, images, or graphs to you to analyze. One thing that we need to understand is that when it comes to visual outputs, there is an interface. And usually, the interface and the actual platforms where you build certain things are different. It really depends on the platforms. Most platforms do have interfaces where you deploy the tool and you interact with the tool, agent, automation, whatever, through their interface. But again, depending on who you are and what your use case, you might want to build an external interface. So you would have one tool running on the back end and one tool which is the front end to interact with the agent or automations. For example, the interface could be a chatbot, which is the most popular way, right? So it's either implementing on a website like this widget here on the right, or this could be, again, the full page embed where, again, you have the chat, but this is an interface to talk to the agent externally, and any people with a link or with a password can do that. Same thing applies here. This is the tool called Relevance. You can export and share this agent, and anyone can log in through the link and interact with it. This is called interface. We can have the messenger connection with either Slack, WhatsApp, Telegram, Instagram, whatever, where you have the automation and agent running on the back end, but the front end is the Slack channel where, again, or any channel where you interact with the agent in the text format, sending files and images maybe to retrieve the information. Or a web form. This is sort of a thing that is similar to the web chat, but here we have an actual form, which is usually like full page, where you input the information, maybe you attach the files, you provide another instruction, you choose different options, and you have the output. So this is the thing that I was showing you here. This is just a different layout, but essentially this is a form. You input the information here, you choose the options, and then you have the completion. Okay, now let's go tool by tool. The first one is Stack. As you can see here on top, I have some information about the company to give you the context so that we can together predict on where the company is going to be in a few years. Stack is positioned as an enterprise solution for developing AI agents, but I don't really like this, like positioning and explaining Stack to you as the enterprise thing, just because it really depends what enterprise means. Usually it means it's scalable, has the right security and the connections. So almost all of these tools, besides I would say maybe VectorShift, just because they are new, and Relevance maybe just because they are a bit more complex, can be used for different size companies, but they would position it specifically, maybe because of the pricing, because their pricing is higher than the average one. I think their main price tier is the $200 a month or something similar. They've been around for 2 years, and this is kind of the investment round that I only found about them. So they got 3 million in the seed one. This is very important for me, and again, I'm kind of biased, and I know that it doesn't really represent the tool behind the company, but as an active agency owner, as the one who is building things daily for other people and businesses, I want to make sure that the tool that I use is relevant, has the money to grow, and has the money to invest into the support and helping the community. Okay, that's why it's very important for me. Stack, for example, doesn't have it just because it's a newer tool, and I think they will eventually go into kind of the enterprise world just because of the model that they choose. I like that they have a lot of the customizable export options when it comes to exporting the agent. Again, you can do these things. Like, this is the third disclaimer that I want to give you. You can do almost all of the things that I'm gonna mention here with other tools, right? And at the end, I will give you the actual fish and will provide you the explanation on which one you should actually use. But right now, I am giving my personal experience with the tool and where I see it's different. Because, for example, I say that Stack has multiple export options. You can export it with a Chrome extension, which is very unique. I would say I've never seen anything like that. You can export it with a WhatsApp, as a web chat, chatbot form, or just, through the API or through the Slack app. You can literally do the same thing with any of the softwares. It's just, again, like just the positioning and how I see the tool. So this is how they look. This is like a regular canvas. If you look closely at each of this tool, they look almost identical. Okay, so Relevance, this tool is a bit different. So they have kind of more like a form type interface. Like N8N is a bit more complex, but like Make has a bit more of a bubbles. But besides that, all of these tools look nearly identical. And you need to understand that they have very similar nodes inside their canvas, and node being the thing that you place on the canvas here. For example, this is the agent that is comparing two documents. And by the way, most of them have great template resources. Some of them have more templates, some of them have less. So I think, the most popular ones just to illustrate how certain things work. So here, for example, you have the input node where you provide, the comparison criteria. You provide the file here. You can either upload it right now, or you can expose it as an input so that user can input the information. Then we have the node. It looks different for each software. They name it differently, but in a nutshell, it's processing the file through a vector database, and then it's providing it as a context to, for example, here is the Together AI, which is a node where you can choose multiple different models. You can choose any of them. Maybe you want to use the OpenAI instead of the Llama. Provide the description, the prompt, and then you get the output. Okay, this is just a standard structure. This for disclaimer, guys, I want to help you. I'm not trying to give you a list of features for each software. That's why I want you to understand that this is not an in-depth tutorial on each of this platform. I am just trying to help you to understand how to think about choosing the right tool and completing the task with certain tools. Okay, so This is in a nutshell how it works. They have a lot of the different inputs, but it's pretty standard to all of the platforms. Maybe they do have certain things, for example, like MySQL integration, and this is what I listed here. They have an enterprise knowledge base connection. So if you go to here to the knowledge base, and if you, for example, want to upload something besides so if you create the knowledge base from scratch, and besides uploading any type of the file, you can create a connection with all of these tools. Some softwares do not allow that, so you would do the same exact thing but with the integration. So if you are, for example, integrating with AWS, you would usually have developers, or you would work with a team of the developers. So uploading the information from AWS would not be a problem for you, even if one software would not have this integration natively. So this is not a problem that you should worry about. It's not like you're trying to build one specific thing that has one specific integration and you need to use this specific tool. Okay, but this is in a nutshell how it works. Then you can export it, as I mentioned, through a lot of different things. So this is the form. You'd have a separate URL. You would input information here. You would upload the documents here and here, and then you can submit. You can also download or copy the output. So for example, if you are maybe creating an agent that will respond to your customers and you do not want it to run on the back end, so that, for example, it either respond to your customers or put the information that it generated to the draft, you can do it here, right? So you can input the information, you can add the knowledge base blocks if you would want, you can upload the documents that it will generate the response based on, and then once you have an actual output, you can copy it and paste it to your Gmail, right? So the same thing works with a chat assistant, which looks like a full embed chat, as I mentioned, like AKA ChatGPT. You can do it as the chatbot here, as the pop-up. WhatsApp, you would need the integration here with Twilio, I believe. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward, okay? Now, when it comes to the actual flaws, I would say that this is what I said in the very beginning, since they are not new. So there are companies that are, that have been developed, for example, in 2023, but this is just from my pure understanding, just because they don't have too much money on the back end, so it's not getting that popular, so it doesn't have the mass adoption, so it's not a lot of the helpful information. They do have in docs and explanations for each node, which is really good, but when it comes to the tutorials on YouTube or either the blog post where people explain certain things, it's not there yet, so you need to keep it in mind. Okay, now Dify, this is the tool which was popular at a time, and I think it was there just because of the open source nature, so you can literally self-host it and use it yourself if you would want. From what I found, they are private, they've not been raising any money, so this is kind of, again, that's okay. I would say that Make.com also probably did not raise any money, so it's not like an actual representation of how big or good of a company, but I already explained why it matters for me. So they've been, on the market since 2023. They didn't raise any money, and they just positioned themselves as one tool for, everything, aka, you have the open source and you can do anything that you would want. You have literally very similar canvas. It's a bit more complex. So if you, for example, go here, I like the interface or stack just a bit more because it's like a bit more visual. Here you have the input fields. It's a bit more tacky, but if you are learning the tool, if you spend a few weeks trying to understand which one of them, like what each one of them does, it's not going to be a problem for you. So here we have the text input. So these are the inputs. Then we have the classifiers. This is just the regular ChatGPT modules that classify the user intent. And then based on the intent, we are sending them to different flows. And then we are actually providing the output, right? So it's very similar. We have the knowledge base. We can create the knowledge base and upload the documents here. They have and support a lot of different documents. You can sync it with either the website directly, so it will scrape the information from there, or sync with Notion, right? So they don't have, as the stack, they don't have that many integrations. But again, if you really want to, for example, upload the information from AWS here, you can easily do that with a few clicks of building something, for example, on make.com that will scrape the information. Then we'll upload it here through the API, because they do have them. They have a pretty big library, pretty okay, I would say, library of the use cases and the chatbots, which are basic, but it will give you an understanding on what each tool can do, right? So when it comes to the flaws, as I said, I didn't really find a way of why Dify. So like, I will give you at the end, I will give you an understanding on what tools we use. So I'm not trying to be biased here and say that I didn't find the reason why. It's more like I didn't find a reason why would you, for example, use it over Stack, right? So just because for me, Stack has a bit more customization option, but yeah, like it's so biased, because you can, as I said, you can do almost anything. But for me, like, Stack looks more familiar because we've been actually using it for a few projects, and Dify looks a bit more on the individual side, maybe with the way how I like, this is just how I feel about the software. Okay, now let's go to the very interesting prospect, which is Lindy. Lindy raised $50 million, and it was, yeah, the latest round was in 2023, and I think they were actually formed in 2023. So Lindy is the software that is trying to be active on socials. I've seen these are sponsoring a few videos here and there from the creators. There is a founder who is pretty active, and he was like doing a few interviews with on the bigger podcast. So I think they are pretty serious when it comes to the actual like the development and developing the advanced agents. So their interface is a bit more different. So it's like if you've never built anything, so it will look identical. But for me, that the person who used a lot of the tools, it looks different in terms of it looks like an email marketing software or an automation that you would build on something like Go High Level, right? So it's really sequential, like, and it goes from top to bottom. You can restructure it like that, but this is how it's supposed to be. And I believe they made the structure just because of their AI conditioning step. And this is what I put here as an advantage: smart conditional logic. Guys, fifth disclaimer: all of the softwares can literally do the same thing. So like this is, for example, is the smart conditional logic, right? So when you have a classifier which is smart and classify the intent based on certain thing, aka condition, and then send it to a specific flow. You can do this with Stack by, I would say, doing some sort of an AI step. You would ask it to output certain thing like 1, 2, 3, and based on the output you would do the condition, right? And then if we go to the Lindy, they have similar thing, but it's natively embedded, if so that you can, for example, here explain that you want to go to the path only if something happens. From what I saw, Lindy was really focusing on the email automation, just because this is the first thing that they have when you land onto their website. They have like the spinning like titles, but the email is the first thing. And this is how I actually heard about them for the first time. You can also, as you can see here, do certain things based on if the email was received or was not received. So they have the steps. For example, here you can add the Gmail account, and then it requires the response or not. So do we wait for the response, or we can go right away to a certain step? So we're checking the knowledge base. Did we find the actual response? And the response here means not actually sending the email, but like generating the response based on the prompt and the knowledge base. The knowledge base, you can also upload any of the documents here. You can do the integration maybe with Intercom, if this is what your business use. And then you actually respond with a generated thing, right? So you input all the information. It's pretty straightforward. And then what I really like is that you can wait till something happens. And this is why it's a bit different from, for example, something like Stack, just because this is like a flow thing. So if you start, you cannot pause it. You can technically do that manually. Maybe I'm not familiar with some functions from Stack, even though we used it for 2 projects. But here, when you start, you need to finalize it. So it cannot like wait, okay? That's where something like Lindy comes in handy, because you can wait for an actual reply. You can replicate very similar thing, but you would need a certain, like the second and third automation that would actually process the reply, and then based on if the reply was, for example, generated by us or by an actual human inside the organization, do certain things. So this is where I think Lindy actually shines, and they have a lot of things going on, and I really like the software. So if we compare it with this, I wouldn't say that, like, there are a few things that you can build with Stack that are not like possible, but wouldn't be actually usable with Lindy. But in general, for 90% of you who are watching the video, I would recommend Lindy over these 2 softwares. But again, it really depends on the use case, 1, and 2, I am making my assumptions not primarily because of the actual toolset, but because of the total funding. I'm sorry, this is maybe not something what some founders of the softwares want to hear, and I wouldn't actually raise any capital myself, just because I am not into the game, even if I would build the software, but so that someone like me would not actually be willing to test the software if they don't have a good funding and the money behind them. But like, this is just how I think about the space, because it's very new. There are new things going on, new things are added every day, and I want my software that I use to win and implement the latest features. That to do that, they need to have a funding. Okay, VectorShift. They raised 3 mil. I think it was their seed round, they being in the Y Combinator, and actually I think the Stack was also there too. I have been doing a few tutorials on VectorShift a few months back, just because again we've been using the tool, I think, for one actually production project. It looks almost identical as the Stack AI. You have the LLMs, you have the knowledge base, you have tons of integrations, and this is what I would put in the actual Pro, which I forgot, is they have so many integrations with so many other tools. But again, this is not a differentiating factor. For example, like you have the make, right? So what's this integration is about? You just like input the webhook, but you can literally do, like, it's easy to do, right? Because you can input the information here, and for an individual that is building something one time, it might be like pretty easy. But you can literally do the same thing with the API request, whatever it's called, with the API request or custom API request to the make, aka doing the actual webhook request. Do they have? Yeah, so they have make, but even if they would not have make, I would still use the HTTP request, but just because it's a bit more customizable. We have the user input. We have another user input, which could be, for example, a file. We have the node from OpenAI to as a system prompt to generate the response. We have the models. We have the settings, and then we have another. Yeah, so it's like it's this. We're like processing the question, then we're getting the information from the file, then we're generating the actual response, and then we're providing it as output. The thing that I put here is the actual portals and the form customization. It would really depend on how you would want to use this pipeline, and they have the pipelines and they have the automations. They are a bit different, but again, so automations are usually running on the backend and pipeline requires an actual input. So you can export this thing into, for example, something like a form. This is what you have here in Stack, right? Something went wrong. Okay, so when you export it, right, so when you export the project here, you can choose the actual form, right, and you have it here. In the VectorShift, you would connect your pipeline with the actual form, and you would create the form and you would customize it here, right? So you don't have that much customizations on the Stack side, but here you have a lot of things. You can do the multi-page form. If you, for example, don't want to provide the output here, you can only get the user question and then submit, and then the next page would be with the actual thing. You can customize the actual styling, the buttons, everything. So again, this is not something that we were using for an actual client delivery project, just because it looks on the basic side, not the engine behind the form, but just the form itself. So I would prefer to build the form, for example, on something like Airtable interfaces and connect it with maybe Zapier to make it more legit, and then run this on the backend. But if you are, for example, just testing it out, if you want to show the prototype to your client, this is a really good way. And I think we did deliver maybe 3 prototypes on VectorShift to our clients just because of the integrations, right? So we didn't want to, I think at that time my developers were kind of busy and I didn't want to figure out the integration myself. So I think we've been integrating with the S3, and I don't remember the second one. So yeah, so like here I literally like did the integration, and that was it. So I created the basic sequence, I exported it as a form, and then I sent the link to the form to the client. And then like we would actually, if I remember correctly, we did not complete the project, so I did not sign the client afterwards, so it was only the prototype built. But if we would, I would probably build the actual thing on the make and do the export through the Airtable interfaces. But they are pretty good. I don't like the fact that they don't have any rounds, and they have a small team, right? So it's like similar thing with the Stack AI. They look identical. If you ask me, okay, Eugene, so which one would you prefer, the Stack or VectorShift? Very, very hard to say. Like I cannot literally say anything. You can choose any. I would probably use Stack just because of how I like the visual. Like I like the visual interface more. It's a bit more clean, so they have a bit more things going on. But I think it's just because they are on the newer side. They have a smaller team. Maybe Stack has a smaller team with that VectorShift, but I'm not sure. So, and I saw, okay, so one thing that I saw, which was very interesting, is that they've been sponsoring a few big YouTubers to like provide the content about their software. So I guess it's a positive thing, just because it means that they care about like marketing and they have the money to invest into the to acquire new clients, because without the new clients they would not be able to exist. But if you ask me which one would survive in 2-3 years period, I would say stack. This is just how I feel about it. Okay, on the flaws, there is no really mass adoption. So I put the same thing with Lindy. So for example, here, this is the podcast with Greg Eisenberg. So there was like a founder that was on the podcast, so it was pretty cool, and like he's a great dude from what I saw. But I don't like the fact that there's like no mass adoption. So like if you go to the YouTube or if you search for the web for example for the Lindy, there's like no forums. There's not that many people are like asking about this thing. They are on the different like comparing sites, but this is not something super useful. So these is kind of the things that I don't like about these softwares, even though they might have a lot of the different like features and a lot of the different useful use cases that you can build it for. But the fact that they don't have the mass adoption kind of scares me a bit if you're planning to use it in the actual production and not for yourself. Okay, out of the four, I would choose Lindy, then I would probably choose Stack, then VectorShift, and then Dify. Now let's go to the bigger players. Relevance AI. A lot of you, I think, heard about them just because they are first, a bit older. So they've been in the market for almost like 4 years now. They've been getting a bit of a traction on YouTube with a few bigger YouTubers popping up here and there that are using Relevance. And they are on the advanced side. Okay, so they raised, about 12 or 15. I'm not sure how accurate the information is. This is what I found. 15 mils in total, which is really good. They have a pretty active founder who is doing like also different interviews and actually is active on their YouTube from what I see. It's different from other softwares just because of their builder, right? So this is, for example, how you would configure an agent. It's pretty straightforward, and this is maybe what, if you're like starting out, this is what maybe you will actually like about it. So because, for example, you can give the agent name, you can give the agent description, you can like create the triggers if you're not actually doing it manually. So you can, for example, when you receive the Gmail or the Outlook or with something happening inside the softwares, you will trigger this out. Then, or you can do it with a custom trigger, right, with the webhooks. Then you would provide the core instructions where you would explain how to do certain things. I really like the way that you can actually reference a tool from here, right? So for example, because sometimes you might need to actually say, hey, you need to trigger the tool called send email, right? And this might give hallucinations if you are doing it at scale. In this case, you are actually embedding this reference into the instructions, and this is what I like. They have the flow builder, and this is one of the flaws that I will tell you at the end. So they have the flow builder, but I've not been playing around with it as much. So maybe the flaw that I will list will not be relevant, but you need to keep it in mind. Okay, so they have it. So they have a template settings just because I copied this template, and this is like what you have here. And if you are, using the HubSpot, you would need to authenticate it. So the ability is whatever. So, and the most important part is the tools, just because you are here in the instructions, you're like explaining, okay, so here, for example, use the Google search, which is the tool. You don't need to mention the tool. So just use the Google search to find the prospect company website and then extract the company from the website. And this is like the two different tools that you can build separately. Again, you can either get one of the tools that you already have, you can get one from the templates, or you can build your own. And this is what I like. These are how the agent's structured on the back end. This is what I like listed here, right? So we have the interface, and the interface here could be in form or an API request. But then on top of the interface, we kind of have a man that is configuring all these tools, aka a master agent. And then we have the tools that are actually performing certain things, right? And like you can create a sub agents beside the tools, and you can do a lot of the different customizations. So I would say Relevance is a really, really good software. So they have a huge library of templates. And when I say huge, it's more like not in the volume, but it's more on the useful side. So for example, even this agent, I think I just copy it from their like main page. This is one of their popular agents, and this is an actual agent that can be useful for some people, right? So it can like research the prospects and generate its things based on the information that was great. So this is not like a test agent that can potentially be used to give you an understanding on how the software is, right? So how the software operates. This is an actual like thing that you can use for yourself or the business, or you can technically even sell it. Obviously, there's like more customization involved. So I really like the fact that they have a lot of the templates and that they are the fast growing, just because I see that they sponsor more and more creators to create the content around them. They have a pretty active YouTube channel. The founder is active. They've been like raising money, and I think they have a lot of the potential. The problem with Relevance, and if you've been watching my channel for a while, you saw that I've never used them actually on the channel, because we have not developed a final project on Relevance. We did multiple, especially when I was starting out with my agency, I did multiple demos and prototypes, maybe like 10 or even 15, where I was like kind of giving people an understanding on different softwares, just because I think I didn't discover yet the VectorShift. But I've been not actively using it because it's not visual, right? So if you know me, I am a visual person. I don't read books. I don't listen to the podcast. When I mention the podcast, it means the YouTube thing, because I need to actually see the visual representation of the people's faces. So I'm a very visual learner, and it's on the harder side to figure out all these things. I am pretty fluent with the actual Relevance, so I understand how each model works, and I understand how module works and what are the different things that you need to do. But it's a bit like harder, just because, for example, one of our main tools is the Voiceflow. As you can see, is that like this is an actual visual thing, even though this might be a bit on the harder side, since you need to connect different modules and you need to reference the things yourself. Here you have a lot of the guides from the actual platform that it says, okay, so this is what we are expecting you from a certain thing, right? But this is just the flaw for me, and I think this might be relevant to some of you guys. Okay, let's go to the big player. I'm not gonna even review them, just because most of you know the guys. Like Zapier, I'm not gonna tell how much they raised. They're valued at 5 billion, whatever, started in 2011. They're dead. Okay, so I'm not sure who still use Zapier. I'm like joking. I know there are people using Zapier. I know the agencies that use them, corporations use them a lot, just because they've been on the market for a while now. They are also like called a make.com replica, or the alternative to make.com, but it's an opposite, right? So the make.com is usually the alternative to Zapier, just because the Zapier is more popular, because they've been like Make was an actual so Make was founded in 2012, but it was the Integramat before. So they're kind of at the same time, but this is a bigger company just because they being more active. I don't really like, just because I don't see a reason why would you use them. I'm not talking about the pricing, okay, which is crazy, and this is one of the main ways why people leave Zapier, right? I don't like the fact that they are a bigger company, aka they are smaller. I know that they will be in the market for a while now, but I was just not aware of like the things that, like, after this AI revolution that they implemented, they kind of rebuilt their interface. They created the interface itself. They created some interfaces, chatbots, as you can see, canvas, agents. So these are all the things. And like, for example, you can do the conditional visual blocks, so you can technically do things like Stack or Lindy. So they're like kind of going there, but obviously they've been on the market with looking like Lindy, right? So they have a step-by-step thing, which is not a dynamic canvas. And they are also not considered a visual development tool, like, for example, Make. So this is why I essentially started. I've been using Zapier for my ecom company when I was like working for other companies, or when I've been developing some automations at the backend with Shopify for my parents. But when I discovered then at that time Integromat and then Make, I like just immediately transferred it just because of the visual interface. So the pro might be the canvas, the chatbots. I was not really finding a use case for them. So this is like, if you want the chatbot, you can literally build it on any other software. So I'm not sure. Obviously, the actual pro with like Zapier is that they have gazillions of integrations, but maybe already like maybe already have more, right? Plus the fact that you can connect with all of the tools through API right now, and you have the Claude and ChatGPT that can help you with this integration, makes the default integration not that useful. Okay, I like that they are robust, right? So like old school, they have a lot of the tutorials on all the different topics. People are still recording videos. Okay, so this is the 4 years old welcome to Zapier. So people are still recording videos about them because it's just on the bigger side. But I would not recommend you to use the software. So it's like slower moving. They're like integrating new features a bit slower, and the pricing is just awful. So it's like laughable. That's why. Okay. Now, N8N. If you've been on the automation space for a while, you would understand that this is the tool that was popping up a lot for the past month, just because of the YouTubers that started to record the videos around them. I know a few guys that got literally, so I have like about like 4.5 thousand of followers in like 6 months. I know that there are some guys that got 10,000 in 2 months just because of the software and because of them like how they were positioning themselves as the N8N expert. Because N8N can do anything. Okay, they being on the market for 2019. This is what I like. They've been raising money, and I think they raised recently. The funding round was raised. No, so it was not there. Anyways, so I like the fact that they have the money. They've been on the market for a while. They are getting so much popular than compared to something like year back when it was considered a very niche tool for the developers. So you would find so many things on YouTube regarding the tool. Plus, it's usually called self-hosting alternative to Make. I'll be honest, we are not actively using N8N. We did, and I mentioned it, and I even showed, I think, 2 scenarios in one of my previous videos where I was building a thing for an insurance agency. So I was like walking through the actual solution, just because they were a bigger company and they wanted to self-host it. So we're not managing it, they self-hosted. So we built everything. We created the tutorials and did a 2-hour like coaching for their team to manage the whole thing, and they are now running it themselves. So we have been using N8N for the self-hosting purposes and not for the purposes of actually building the automation. There is no reason for it, just because. So this is one of the templates that I imported from their library, which is also really good. Plus the fact that there are a lot of the tutorials and the YouTubers which are usually sharing the templates that they built for free is really good. They have the visual interface, right? So they have all the things, and you can literally do anything with the software. This is not a differentiating factor because you can technically do it with all the other softwares. But if you are, for example, working with bigger, chunks of data, if you are extracting a very, very complex structures from the from the databases that you connect to, you might want to consider this thing, just because it's very developer friendly. It's not friendly in terms of the very beginners, but if you've been, developing certain things, you would understand that it's looks like a visual representation of the code, right? So I think sometimes on of the N8N as the voice, not the voice flow, the web flow of the automation world. And obviously voice flow is also the web flow. But if we are talking specifically about automations and not just text-based chatbots and agents, I would say this is the best representation of the Webflow, just because Webflow is the visual thing, but it's operated as the same way as you would build and you will self-code the whole website. So this is very similar thing. You can self-host it. You do have a lot of the different tools and actions that you can do by default. So this is an awesome tool. I do recommend it, but only if you are a one type of a person, because the second tool that we have is make.com. Make is a bit more visual, it's a bit more simplified, but you can also do anything here. If there is no integration from the gazillions of apps that they have, you can build your own through the HTTP request and different flow and tools modules that they have by the default. So in 99% of the cases, it's very hard to find something that Make cannot do and N8N can. But you need to understand that the Make doesn't have any interface at all, and the N8N does. And there are guys like Chat Dash, for example. So Chat Dash. So this is a front end that we have been using, for example, for some of our chatbots. So for example, if we build something on Voiceflow, this is the chatbot. To export it, we can either embed website directly, right, through the widget, which is provided by the Voiceflow, or we can connect it to the front end tool like Chat Dash so that we have all the analytics about it and do it like that. So recently I woke up today and they announced that they will have an integration with N8N. So you can build the agent on N8N and have the visual interface of a chatbot using the Chat Dash and have all the the stats for it, right? So the conversation history, all the chats, the analytics, and all these things. So but they have it by default, so you can share like the direct link. Technically you cannot do this on Make, right? And at one point I think maybe like the Chat Dash will add Make, but Make is not positioned as the AI agents platform. It's more like for the automations that run on the backend, right? But I would prefer Make, and this is what we primarily use. First, because it's much more popular, and I think it will keep it that way, even though maybe N8N is a bigger and in-depth tool, but it's the tool for more for the people that are kind of going in-depth into the development, even though you can do everything with Make. So Make has a bigger adoption, and it's easier for me as an AI agency owner to sell something, especially if we're selling one-time thing and not the retainer, to sell something on Make, because I can easily explain the tech director or the founder and the CEO how to use it, just so that they have an idea. And it will be like a bit harder to do that on N8N, even though it's like very doable. So for the N8N, the only flaw that you would have is harder to learn. But again, like this is not an actual flaw. It really depends on who you are and what your goals are. So there's like almost no flaws here. For the Make, easy to use, huge community from their forum where you can probably answer all your questions, to the Discord communities like mine. And by the way, if you are planning to sell the AI automations and build the advanced things, you can check out my community where I personally help people to sign their first high ticket automation clients. For example, for some reason it's not loading. It's hosted on the Discord, as you can see here. We have the chat, we have the business and the technical hub where I help people to sign their clients. Technical hub is where there is my technical team connected to help you with certain things throughout the development. We have a 12-week step-by-step course that goes from choosing the niche, choosing the service, creating the profitable offers, running the cold outreach, paid ads, organic growth. So everything that you would need to grow your agency. And we also have a 150 plus something sales recordings that you can watch between me and my customers. So this is an ultimate community that you'll have, and you also have some premium templates that we have built for our clients that are only available there. So you can check it out. Thus, I would, and this is what we still do, we choose make over N8N, but I know that I need to give N8N a bit more attention just because it's getting more popular. And if I want to grow my YouTube channel, I probably need to record some more videos about it. Okay, so make easy to use, huge community on the flows. It's no visual interface in terms of the interacting with the agent, right? So it's more for the automations and not the agents, right? So this would be the only flaws, which is not relevant here because they do have the visual interface, plus they have, the things like chat dash that you can literally export it from. Okay, you can export the agents to there. And we have the last platform, which is Voiceflow. I would say this is our favorite, and you know that I am the big lover of the Voiceflow. I record a lot of tutorials on them, but not because they are like the only holy grail of tools, just because this is the holy grail of tools when it comes to the chatbot, and I don't like word chatbot, the text-based agents that your customers will interact with. They have an in-depth possibility of creating the conditional logic and in-depth assistance to help your users. So this is the best platform when it comes to building text-based agents, which can be, as I already said, internal or external. So internal agents, meaning you would interact with the agent or your team would, or external. We are building both on Voiceflow, but for the internal agents, I would say it's better to use something like what N8N, just because they are, again, having the integration right now with the chat dash. But if we are talking about the customer service agents or the setters, this is the best platform to use it for. So they've been on the market since 2018, even before the ChatGPT came out. So they raised a lot of money. They have an awesome team, awesome Discord, so awesome support, a lot of the tutorials on YouTube. So I really like them. Sorry guys, it seems like maybe the paid tutorial, and maybe if I would ask Voiceflow, they would sponsor some videos, but I'm not this just because we are using them. So okay, advanced conversational design, this is the main advantage, and advanced knowledge base for the conversational design and extracting information from your knowledge base. On the flows, there is no native integration, so they introduced the Voiceflow marketplace, which is essentially like a tool marketplace. So you can think about this as a master agent, and within this pipeline, you can technically call different tools. So for example, if the customer is asking for to retrieve information about his order, so essentially this would be, or let's go with a relevance. So you would say here the color instructions, hey, if the customer is asking for the information about his order, run this tool, right? And this tool would be actually the connection to your CRM to extract the information to Shopify, whatever, if you're building for the e-com. So, and I'm pretty sure they might have the Shopify integration out of the box. Let's see. No, they don't. Anyways, so here you can use the same thing, but you would usually use the API block, right? So you would like call the API and then you would do anything. So it's like, it's pretty easy to do if you understand the basics, just because it's very visual interface. But what they introduced is the actual functions, right? And they have the functions marketplace where you can like functions Voiceflow, where you can browse the existing functions that were built either from them or from the community. This is like a tool, right? So this is like a marketplace of tools. What I don't really like is that it's not like super active. I wouldn't say that there are like too many people that are building it up. They had like a few campaigns going on to motivate people, but yeah. So this is kind of not something on the stronger side of the Voiceflow. For example, there's guys like BotPress, obviously. So like, I would not use BotPress just because you have the Voiceflow, but the BotPress has a bit of a more integration out of the box, right? For example, with all the channels to export it to. So you can export it directly from the BotPress. You do not need to have something like the channel dash as the front end, right? You can, so it's very hard to do the same thing with the Voiceflow, right? You can do this through the API and Make technically, and like do the WhatsApp integration there, but you would still need to use some sort of a third-party database. So I would say this is the flaw on the Voiceflow side for the marketplace. Okay, so these are the 9 tools that I was planning to review. Now let's jump into my recommendations. You can be a business owner, individual that want to use it for yourself, business to also like use it for yourself, but for the business purposes. You can be an individual and look for a job in the field, which is a bit different. So this is like just to use for fun and like to be more productive, and this is to actually make money, but as you know, a developer in the field. Or you can build an agency like me and sell AI services. If you want to do that, go to my community and check all the materials. Okay, so if you're a business, I would, and like you are planning to do everything yourself, right? I would recommend you to use Lindy, Make, and Voiceflow. So Lindy, if you are, for example, planning to automate some sort of the emails, as you can see here, or you're using just, you want to build a conditional logic with the agent that retrieve information from some of your resources, you can use Lindy. Just because, again, I believe in the company. I believe they will grow. They have a great support from what I saw, and they're pretty easy to use. There would be like a bit easier on the learning side. Okay, if you are planning to build maybe something more complex, or then if you are planning to maybe craft the draft yourself, test it out, and then hire a developer, you'd use Make. Because, for example, if you come to me and say, hey, Eugene, we have the thing with on Lindy, is going on, so can you add a few more things? So I would not probably take the order from you, just because like we're not actively using it, and like it's going to be on the harder side for me to figure this out and like actually create the new modules for here, because the minimum budget that we work with is $5,000, and just to add a few things, it's not gonna cost that much. I don't want to overcharge you, for example. That's why we would still rebuild everything on Make, or if you want to self-host on NADN. So if you're like kind of building it seriously, if you have an in-depth, if you have a lot of the use cases for your company that you want to automate, you would use Make. But if you want to play around with, for example, one thing that you just want to be fixed as soon as possible, use Lindy. If you are building the conversational thing and you want for the like customer support, or as a setter, if you're building an agent that will interact with your customers, go with the Voiceflow, even though it's a bit on the harder side. Obviously, you can use something like the chat base or any other like the gazillions of tools out there, but which are like pretty simple, right? So you can just input some instructions here and you can like have the connections with like pretty basic tools. But if you are, again, serious about it, if you have a lot of the incoming cases, you want to have an in-depth analytics, you would actually go with a Voiceflow. If you are an individual looking to automate some of the things in your life, Relevance would be the best choice, just because it's lower learning curve
you can go with Make, but it's a bit harder. For me, it's easier just because I've been in the space for a while now, plus I'm a visual learner. For the very beginners, I think the Relevance is better. It's not because Relevance is the beginner tool. You can, as I already mentioned, you can build almost anything on Relevance. I'm saying that it's going to be easier for you to figure out through the interface, which might be a bit more familiar and a bit more straightforward, okay? So this would be my recommendation. If you are looking for a job in the field, N8N and Make. Again, so you would, there are, I know, a lot of the businesses, this, and also a lot of the agencies that are looking for the developers. I do not. But when we have been developing the thing for N8N, so I have the team of 6 at that time. It was like the team of 3, and we had only one backend developer, which is still not pretty familiar with N8N. So we had more projects. So I didn't want to actually give him a task to figure this out himself. So we hired a developer that had a pretty good understanding with N8N to help us out as the consultant. Okay, so there is a market for it right now, especially if you're planning to go on the platforms like Upwork. Okay, and Make is obviously the same thing, just because a lot of the companies use this thing and a lot of the agencies. So if you're looking for a job inside an agency, it will probably more likely use Make than N8N. But if you are looking for a job as the automation consultant or an automation specialist within a company for an actual payroll, I would say you better to use both tools, as well as to have a really good understanding of the JavaScript and APIs. This is like everything that you need. If you have like these tools under your hood, and you understand how the JavaScript works, just because, again, so there are a lot of things here which come from the JS, like just the logic and how certain things are operated, right? So like the same thing with Make, with all this like iterators, aggregators, you need to understand how it works, okay? So the JavaScript is a must, and the APIs also is a must, just because you would probably connect to all the tools, even though they may have an existing integration, you would want to do that. If you are planning to sell this as for a living, right? So if you're planning to build a business around selling AI services, either as a consultant, either as a freelancer, or either as an agency like me, you would use Make. Alex, or N8N, right? So you would use Make for all of the automations for your clients, and you would use N8N only if they want to self-host it. Listen me up. You might think that N8N is better, cooler, and like has more functions. In reality, you can build, like if you're planning to sell it, right? You can build 95% of the things, 99 maybe, inside Make. So learn the software and figure everything out, figure out all the modules, and start building something. If you need help with signing the clients, understanding how, to run the outreach, how to create an offer, what is the best niche, go check out the bootcamp. So this is everything that you need. Make and understanding of N8N. But I would not learn them both. Learn Make, okay? And have a basic understanding of N8N. If you have a client which want to self-host it, which is probably a bigger client, then you have a budget to actually hire a consultant or use it and try to do it yourself. For all the text-based agents, use Voiceflow. If you want to build, for example, an interface for business to interact with the text agent, if you want to build it internally, and I was showing similar things where we have been building a tool for the sales department to retrieve information from their customers in a dynamic conversational way. So you can use maybe Airtable as the interface, Airtable interfaces, right? So you can connect it externally through the APIs. Voiceflow has great API connections. Or if you want to go in depth, you can actually do it with software. So, right? So you would have the database on Airtable, and the front end will not be built on the Airtable interfaces, but rather on the software. This is everything that I wanted to tell you guys. If you have any questions, post in the comments. If you have an in-depth question, I answer everything in 99 players. So thanks for watching. Peace.